When I heard through a mutual friend that he had split up with Sarah, I wrote to him, apologizing and asking for forgiveness and a second chance. What's going on once again, everybody? Welcome to the channel. If you are new to the channel, I invite you to subscribe. Welcome and good to have you. If you are a returning viewer, good to see you again. I'm going to go over an article titled, I left the love of my life because I thought I could do better. Now I'm childless and alone at 42. This article was first published on Daily Mail in 2013. It was updated in 2017. And many of you have come across this article from other content creators before, but it's never a bad idea to reiterate what we've been talking about for this past few years in this space. And it's just proved the point that you can give a woman the perfect life, the perfect of everything. She can have the perfect man, and I'm not saying all women, but the vast majority of them going to mess it up. And this article is just a perfect example of that. We're gonna get into it. Laughing and dancing with my fiancé at our engagement party. I thought I might actually burst with happiness. Surrounded by our families and friends, I looked at Matthew and felt certain I had met the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Quite simply, he was my soulmate. Karen Cross regrets leaving her first love and mistook contentment for unhappiness. We were desperately in love and had our future life together mapped out. First, we would save to buy our own home. Then would come a romantic wedding ceremony and children would follow. It all seemed so simple to my naive 19-year-old self. I smugly told myself the girl had it all. So why, 20 years later, do I find myself single, childless, and tormented by the fact that I have thrown away the only true chance of happiness I ever had? 8 years after that wonderful engagement party in 1989, I walked away from dear, devoted, loyal Matthew, convinced that somewhere out there a better, more exciting, more fulfilling life awaited me. Only there wasn't. Now, I'm 42 and have all the trappings of success, a high-flying career, financial security, and a home in the heart of London's trendy Notting Hill. But I don't have the one thing that I crave more than anything, a loving husband and a family. My father warned me not to throw this love away, but I was sure I'd find Mr. Perfect around the corner. You see, I never did find another man who offered everything Matthew did, who understood me and loved me like he did, someone who was my best friend as well as my lover. I mean, you can't be too sad now with the outcomes because that's what you chose. Your father warned you and you didn't listen. See, those Matthew guys, they only come around once in a lifetime. Once you pass one up, it's almost never comes around again. Today, seeing friends with their children around them tortures me, as I know I am unlikely ever to have a family of my own. I think about the times Matthew and I talked about having children, even discussing the names we would choose. I cannot believe I turned my back on so much happiness. Instead, here I am on the singles market, looking for the very thing I discarded with barely a backward glance all those years ago. I know I can't have Matthew back, and it hurts when I hear snippets of information about his life and how content he is. 15 years after I ended our relationship, he is happily married. Good for Matthews. At this time of year, so many people will be assessing their lives and relationships, wondering if the grass is greener on the other side. You mean so many women? Okay. Many will mistake contentment for boredom, forgetting to cherish the good things they have. I would urge those who are considering walking away from such riches to think twice. Yeah, women. There's a lot of them who does that. They always think, oh, the grass is always greener on the other side. Yeah, sure. Go find out. How different things would be for me now if only I'd listened to Matthew when he pleaded with me not to leave him in 1997. Tears pouring down his face, I was crying too, and it tortured me to watch the heart of the man I loved breaking in front of me. But I was resolute. If that's something you tell yourself to make yourself look good and making yourself sound sympathetic, yeah, it's not working. You didn't care. At the time, you didn't care. You wanted what you wanted and you walked away from the man you supposedly loved. It doesn't matter now. Hey guys, as you're watching the video, do me a favor. Please hit the like or dislike button. It doesn't matter. I don't really care. It helps the video and the channel push up through the algo. That helps more men and women get the message and hopefully stop making bad decisions. Thank you. Let's move on with our story. One day, I might look back and realize I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I told him as we clung to each other desperately. How prophetic those words have proven to be. I will always be here for you, Matthew promised, and I arrogantly thought that somehow I could put him on ice and return to him. You see, from what she said, this is a strategy, gentlemen. How they go out there testing the market, get their backs blown out, they do all kinds of things with the other dudes who don't want anything to do with them. And you, they put you there, having you wait, and even if they didn't like you back in high school, in college, never give you the chance of the day, right? When they're old, they've been used and discarded by those guys. Now they'll come back and looking for you. Saying even after they have a few kids and they gain massive amount of weight, now they come back and retracing their steps to say, you know what, I remember that guy who used to come after me, who used to ask me out and this and that. Let me give him a chance and whatnot. That's a strategy, fellas. It's a mating strategy that women practice. Matthew and I met when we attended the same comprehensive school in Essex. We started dating just before Christmas 1987 when I was 17 and studying for my A levels. By that time, he had left school and was working as a motorcycle courier. We got on like a house on fire, and our families each supported the relationship. Before long, we had fallen in love. Matthew was romantic but incredibly practical, something that would later come to annoy me. His gifts to me that Christmas were a leather jacket and a pair of thermal leggings. And ladies, let me let you understand something. When a man gets you something, it didn't just go out there and window shop and select, you know what, I'm gonna pick this and give it to her. No, we actually thought about it. And sometimes we may have even been thinking about it for a couple months, even a few months at that matter. Why? Because we look at your life and we see where you need something and then we get you that thing specifically. See, man, we don't just buy things just because we buy things. We buy things because there is a need for it. Occasionally, we would just go out and buy something just because we don't need it. But most often than not, we buy something very practical. There is a need for it, a specific need. And a lot of time, ladies, you may not consider the gift as being romantic. But I can promise you, when we get you something, we actually thought about it a lot. 2 weeks later, when we'd been seeing each other for less than a month, he proposed. We were in my little mini clubman when he shouted at me to stop the car. Scared something was wrong, I braked in the middle of traffic and we both jumped out. Then, oblivious to the other drivers beeping their horns, he got down on one knee in the middle of the road. I love you, Karen Cross, he said. Promise you'll marry me one day. I laughed and said yes, thrilled that he felt the same way I did. In the summer of 1989, while out for a romantic meal, Matthew proposed properly with a diamond solitaire ring. 2 months later, we held our engagement party for 40 friends and family at the little house we were renting at the time. The following year, we bought a tiny starter home in Grays, Essex, which we moved into with furniture we had begged, borrowed, and stolen. We giggled with delight at the thought of this growing new family. I was in my first junior role at a woman's magazine and Matthew worked fitting tires and exhaust. So our combined salaries of around €15,000 a year meant we struggled to make the mortgage payments. but we didn't care, telling ourselves that it wouldn't be long before we were earning more and able to afford weekly treats in a bigger home where we could bring up the babies we had planned. But then the housing market crashed and we were plunged into negative equity. Struggling should have brought us closer together, and at first it did. But as time went on and my magazine career and salary advanced, I started to resent Matthew as he drifted from one dead end job to another. I still love him, but I began to feel embarrassed by his blue collar job, annoyed that despite his intelligence, he didn't have a career. Then he brought a lurid blue and pink Volkswagen Beetle. Why couldn't he drive a normal car? Things that now seem incredibly insignificant began to niggle. I began to wish he was more sophisticated and earned more. I felt envious of friends with better off partners who were able to support them as they started their families. And before you say anything, this is not a bad trait at all for women. Now they have to ensure that the guy they with, if they procreate with him, he has to have enough to take care of her and her children. That's not a bad trait at all. But now you see all these young girls, all these women, whatnot, they go overboard with that. But in reality, this is not a bad trait at all. And for a lot of guys, I see they're looking for women and starting family and everything. Look, man, if you don't have the money to take care of, I don't think the woman should even be looking your ways at all, to be honest with you. But on the opposite of that, women in mass, um, the vast majority of them lack patience. For a guy, it takes a lot of time to accumulate wealth, to build, and have enough to support a family. If you choose to be with that man, just know it's gonna take some time. And patience is something the vast majority of them do not have a sense of. They lack patience, plain and simple. I stopped seeing Matthew as my equal. I stopped seeing all the qualities that had made me fall in love with him. His fierce intelligence, our shared sense of humor, his determination not to follow the crowd. Instead, I saw someone who was holding me back. I encouraged them to find a career and was thrilled when he was accepted to join the police in 1995. It should have heralded a new chapter in our lives, but it only hastened the end. We went from spending every evening and weekend together to hardly seeing one another. Matthew was doing round the clock shifts while I worked long hours on the launch of a new magazine. Our SCX life had dwindled, and nights out together were rare. I stopped appreciating little things he did, like leaving romantic notes on the pillow or scouring secondhand bookshops for novels he knew I'd loved. He was my best friend, yet I took him totally for granted. After festering for weeks about his shortcomings, I told Matthew I was leaving. We spent hours talking and crying as he tried to convince me to stay, but I was adamant. My parents were horrified that I was walking away from a man they felt was right for me. My father's words to me that day continue to haunt me. Karen, think carefully about what you're doing. There's a lot to be said for someone who truly loves you. But I refused to listen, convinced there would be another, better Mr. Right waiting around the corner. I moved into a rented flat a few miles away in Hornchurch, Essex, and embraced single life with a vengeance. By now, I was an editor on a national magazine. Life was one long round of premieres and dinner or drinks parties. Matthew and I remained close, even telling each other about new relationships. But though I dumped him, I never felt the women he met were good enough. I can see now I was acting out of jealousy. I clearly wanted to keep him for myself. Our closeness was, however, called to a halt in 2000 when he met his first serious girlfriend after me, Sarah. One night, shortly after his 34th birthday, I phoned to ask his advice about something. Matthew was unusually abrupt and asked me not to call him again. Please don't send me birthday or Christmas cards anymore either. Sarah opened your card last week and was really upset. I have to put her feelings first. I hated the fact Matthew was suddenly putting another woman before me. How dare she comes between us? Over the next few weeks, I'm ashamed to say I vented my spleen at both of them in a series of heated phone calls. I was completely irrational. I didn't want Matthew back, but felt upstaged by Sarah. Unsurprisingly, after one particular nasty argument, Matthew put the phone down and refused to take any more of my phone calls. I didn't realize it at the time, but I would never speak to him again. Shortly afterwards, I met Richard. It was a whirlwind romance, and within a year we were engaged in buying an idyllic farmhouse in the Norfolk countryside while I continued my journalistic career commuting to London. He was a successful singer, and as we toured the country, I thought I had finally found the excitement and love that I craved. But Matthew was never far from my thoughts, and Richard complained that I often brought him into conversation, even comparing them both. Yeah, that is never a good thing when you're with a woman and she's comparing you, and she's often talking about some other men she's been with. It's never a good thing. And it explained that she's not over this guy. She still wants him back, but unfortunately the door is closed. Pay attention to that, fellas. They were so different. Although outwardly romantic, Richard was repeatedly unfaithful, and I never felt secure enough to start a family with him. Eventually, after 3.5 years together, he walked out, having admitted his latest paramour was pregnant by him. Well, of course, he's a musician. He's a popular dude. And I'm not saying every musician cheat, but the guy is a popular dude. He's everywhere. Women want him. What did you expect? And like you said, he is a very successful singer. So, women would be attracted to him as well. My life fell apart. Over the next year, I struggled to pull myself back together and did a lot of soul searching. I finally understood what my father had meant. I realized Matthew was the only person who had loved and understood me. But for you, that wasn't good enough, was it, huh? When I heard through a mutual friend that he had split up with Sarah, I wrote to him, apologizing and asking for forgiveness and a second chance. Yeah, right. Oh boy. It was 6 years since we had last spoken, but naively, I thought he would want to hear from me. What I didn't know was that Sarah was still living at the house, and it was she who opened my very personal letter. It included my phone number, and she left me several angry, hurtful voicemail. Yet again, I had inadvertently caused problems in Matthew's life, so it wasn't surprising I never heard from him. Despite writing several times over the next few months, in the end, I left it at birthday and Christmas cards, thinking he'd find a way to get in touch if he ever changed his mind. Then, I heard a couple of years ago, Matthew had married his new partner, Nicola. For a few moments, I couldn't breathe, then the tears came. Matthew and Nicola still live in Essex, and as far as I know, don't yet have children. That's the next milestone I truly dread. It's been 11 years since Matthew and I last spoke, and I have to accept that door has closed. Perhaps he has found what he is looking for, and I am a distant memory. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you are. But that was your choice. You chose to leave the man who was there for you. And granted, you were born in 1970. 2023, now you are 53 years old. I would love to get an update on this article. Not to bash you, but I would want to find out what you think now, being you made the decisions to leave the man who you thought would be the love of your life, as you claim, and you left him. I have had one other significant relationship since Richard with Rob, but that recently ended after 4 years. Rob reminded me a lot of Matthew. Wow, she cannot get over this guy. He was decent and honorable, the life and soul of the party, but with a kind and sensitive side. But we were each too jaded by previous heartbreak to make it work. You see, you wouldn't have to deal with any of that. I mean, why would you leave a guy who was there for you, who wanted to be with you and build a life and future with you, just so you can go out there thinking you could do better and ended up with so many heartbreak? Now your whole life and your relationship skills is feeble. Make that make sense? Absolutely no sense whatsoever. If you had listened to your father, you wouldn't have to deal with any of that. And while I wanted children, he had a grown up son and didn't want to start over again. So once again, I am on my own. My mind full of ifs only. If only I'd stay with Matthew, we'd almost certainly be married with children. Or maybe Matthew wasn't the right man. I will never know the answer. But my decision to leave him has cost me the chance of ever becoming a mother. Oh, yes, it did. Now I can only look back and admonish my selfish younger self. When I visit friends and family back in our hometown, I can't help but hope I'll bump into Matthew. I'd like to think I'd say sorry, that I will always be there for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he turned his back on me and kept walking. You turn your back on him first. To those out there thinking of walking away from humdrum relationships, I would say don't mistake contentment for unhappiness as I did. It could be a choice you'll regret for the rest of your life. Again, I'd like to get an update from this article, and maybe you could give us a perspective of what you think now that you are 53 years old. And if you ever got the chance to start a family and have the life you wanted, the life without Matthew. So this is the end of the article. What I'm going to do now is go through a few comments and we'll call it a day. This woman says, I can relate to this woman in a way, but I have not had a serious relationship in years. So it's not like I've had the opportunity to marry or have children. I am almost 40 and childless as a result of no relationships, but I have been trying to conceive on my own for about 2 years. I am open to adopting, but being single, everything is more difficult. I am looking at tens of thousands of dollars and a long wait in order to adopt through an agency that even accepts single women. I was willing to settle for a nice guy 3, 4 years ago since I desperately wanted children, but just could not settle, and now I find myself longing for a family of my own. I really don't care about having a man since I am fairly self-sufficient and have a decent career. She is 40, not too old to be a mother, but she will need some help if she wants to have a baby with her own eggs. It does happen, but it is harder when you're over 40. She still has time. She needs not to waffle back and forth and do it now. This guy is highlighting a point she made in the article, where she stated, Matthew was romantic but incredibly practical, something that would later come to annoy me. His gift to me that Christmas were a leather jacket and a pair of thermal leggings. He says, ladies, if there's one thing I'd like you to understand about men, please don't take offense if we give you something like this. The fact that we are gifting you things that you can and will use regularly, things you need to use, is our way of showing you that we care about you. Yes, I get it. You might like flowers more because they are prettier, But for a man, from his logical perspective, a pair of leggings seems to us like a better gift to you. This woman replies to his comment, "This is so true. One year my husband gave me a water filter for my birthday. It took me aback at the time when he asked me what kind I wanted. I was tempted to say I didn't want a water filter of all things at all. But I told him the kind I preferred, and in due course it arrived. Of the kind I nominated, a ceramic drip filter system. He had perfectly chosen one to suit my aesthetic taste, locally and ecologically made, and told me at length how much thought and care went into its choosing. I have had it 5 years now. It gets used every single day and makes the best tasting water, so I am never dehydrated. I regularly tell him it was the best present I have ever received, which is the truth. I am blown away and humbled to know he knows me so well, and wanted to get me something that would take care of me every day, in a way so subtle that I couldn't even grasp it in concept." So this is the end of the article, guys, and the comments and everything. And as you can see, even when they have the perfect situation, when they have the perfect guy, the perfect life, they always find a way to mess it up. So, hey, not much we can do. Once again, thank you for checking out the video. If you come across any good articles, good story, or you have a personal story of your own you think might be helpful to either a man or a woman, please email me at theintentionalmanofficial@gmail.com. Please allow me some time and I'll be sure to cover it. And on a side note, please use good grammars and punctuation because some of the stories I read, they're just hard to read. It's impossible to follow them. But anyway, comment below, let us know what you think. Subscribe to the channel, like the video on your way out, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.